Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. I wanted to do a short series on how I'm going about reducing my family's power consumption. So in this first video, I want to have a bit of a look and focus on how I'm going about planning that and give you some ideas for how you might be able to do it too. So let's go. So you may be asking, why do I want to reduce my family's power consumption? Well, first of all, is to try and reduce our impact on the planet. And this is something I think that is really important and we can all do better on. Secondly, and this is the obvious one, to save money. Power here in Australia is getting ridiculous, and I want to reduce how much we are spending on it. At the moment, we spend probably around $2,500 to $3,000 a year on power, and that's just crazy. The third one is to reduce our risk of fire. So, these things get hot, electronics produce a lot of heat, and they are one of the higher leading causes of fires. So the next part of that is, how can we reduce our power consumption? There's of course the obvious one, which is to reduce the number of devices that we have. And by devices, I mean obviously the obvious things such as computers, iPads, iPhones, Android devices, etc. But I also mean things like, in the context of what we're talking about here, appliances, so washing machines, fridges, etc., things like that. So anything where I mention devices from this point forward, I'm sort of meaning basically anything electronic that you have in your house. The second thing we can do is to reduce how much power we actually use. And there's a number of ways that we can do this. We can, for example, replace any old and inefficient devices with new, more energy efficient, like Energy Star rated devices, to reduce how much power they're actually using. We can also change how we use a device. So obviously there are a lot of things like a fridge or a freezer or a TV, you can't really change how you use it as such, but certainly things like computers, you can set things up differently. You can change how you use them in order to decrease either their usage or how much power they're using while you use them. As I kind of just alluded to, by using the device less, it will use less power. So we can reduce our consumption that way as well. And then to go to the extreme side of that, we can just switch them off altogether. And that is kind of where my focus is with what I'm trying to set up here. So some of the things I mentioned we already have in place, such as energy efficient appliances. We have star rated appliances and water rated appliances that are efficient in those areas. There's not a huge amount we can do to change how we're using our things currently. I think we're doing pretty well at that. And so this is why the primary focus for me at this point is to really reduce our power consumption by just switching things off altogether. Now, when it comes to switching things off, obviously we can't just go around and flick and turn all the switches off and then nothing works. You still need to be able to use these things. So we need to think about it a little bit. So the first step in figuring out how I'm going to do this, or what devices I'm going to turn off, is to look at, well, what devices need to stay on all the time? What devices can I not switch off? And probably the obvious one there is fridges and freezers. Another good one is anything with a hard drive in it when it comes to computer gear. So hard drives obviously spinning all the time. If you suddenly shut off the power, that can create a lot of problems. Doesn't always, but it can do. So we want to try and avoid switching off anything that has a hard drive in it that is spinning all the time, that has no ability for you to shut it down. So a computer, for example, you can shut down, so that's not a problem. But a good example is the Apple time capsule, which we use here in the house. That has a hard drive in it, it spins all the time, and there is no, because it's an early generation model, as far as I'm aware anyway, there is no shutdown procedure for that. So the only way to turn it off and to stop it from spinning is to switch the power off. But I guess, like I say, that can cause issues. The second step is to look at what devices we can switch off on a daily basis. Now these are generally going to be things that we would tend to use on a daily basis, such as TVs, coffee machines, toasters, microwaves. It's also going to be things such as our computer networks, our networking gear, our modem. These things are designed to be left on all the time, but when they're on, they're consuming power. So essentially all these daily type devices are any of these things that generally we don't need to have on at night. And anything that, especially that has a standby mode, for example, like such as your TVs. We have a projector in our home theatre. Anything that has a little light that stays on when you push that button on the remote to turn it off. The third thing that we can look at is to have a look at what devices we only use on an occasional basis, and switch those off and leave them off basically. So a good example, I kind of just mentioned our projector in our home theatre. This goes for everything in our home theatre. We don't use the home theatre every day of the week. It's generally an evening thing or a weekend thing. So I'm going to put the home theatre and everything that's in it into this category, which is I'm going to switch everything off and just leave it turned off at the wall. There's no need to have it on using power unnecessarily. And then when we do need to use it, we'll just go around and flick the switches on and we'll be ready to go. So that covers us for sort of the three categories that, as I see it, that we can put things into as to whether we can or can't, or how we might go about switching them off. So the fourth thing here is to look at how we can set up our daily use devices. So that was the second group that I mentioned previously. And the way we can do this is to look at how things are plugged in first of all. So anything that's on a single outlet. So for example, say you've got a lamp and it's plugged directly into the wall, I would term that to be a single outlet. It's just a single device plugged straight into the wall, one switch, and that device is turned off. So the second part of this is anything that's plugged in using a power board. So for example, you might have your computer, monitor, external hard drive, any of that sort of stuff. You might have them all plugged into a power board, and then that power board is plugged into the wall socket. So that's one switch to turn off a number of devices. So once you've figured out the difference between whether something is just a single plugged into the wall or whether it's a group such as the computer and monitor plugged into the wall, then you can think a little bit about how or what devices need to be turned off or are going to be turned off, and how you might be able to group them. So things like on our network here that are plugged into the same power board, I would probably take the time capsule, for example, remove that and plug that in as a single so that it stays on just by itself. But everything else that's involved in our computer network and our computers here, I would put onto power boards, and then they can just be shut down and switched off at the wall. The fifth thing is going back to that third group, which is our occasional use devices. So these are pretty simple. They're only going to get switched on when they're used. The rest of the time they're going to be off. So there should be nothing there that needs to be changed around or anything like that. It's just a simple matter of shutting it down, switching it off at the wall, and you're good. So there you have it. That's just a brief idea of how I'm planning reducing my family's power consumption. So the first step was to figure out what devices need to stay on all the time. The second step was to figure out what devices are used on a daily basis that can be switched off on a daily basis. The third step was to figure out what devices are only used on an occasional basis. And those first three steps sort of form those three groups of how I sort of grouped our devices together. The fourth one was thinking about the setup of our daily devices, and how you can set it up so that you only have to switch off certain things, and the things that need to stay on are just plugged in by themselves. And then the fifth thing, obviously, was thinking about our occasional use devices and how they get plugged in. So thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to hit that subscribe button down below. You can also leave me a comment. Let me know any of your ideas and thoughts on any of what we've talked about here. And lastly, hit that share button. Pass it on to some friends and family. So that's all. I hope to see you back here next time. Until then, take it easy and go live a little. See ya.